I'm 96 years old. I've lived long enough to watch the world change its face more times than I can count. I've buried people I thought I couldn't live without. I've survived wars, losses, mistakes I still don't have words for, so believe me when I tell you this. I am not the kind of person who chases visions. Most of my life I trusted what I could touch, what I could measure, what I could explain. And for a very long time, that was enough, until it wasn't. The experience I'm about to describe didn't happen in a church. There was no lightning, no voice booming from the sky. That's what makes it difficult to explain, because nothing about it looked extraordinary, and yet everything changed. It happened on a quiet morning, the kind of morning you don't remember unless something interrupts it. I was sitting alone, breathing slowly, not praying, not thinking, just being. At my age, you learn how to sit with silence. You stop fighting it. You let it sit beside you like an old acquaintance. And then something shifted, not around me, and in that stillness, something became painfully clear, not as words, as understanding, and the first thing I understood was this: most of what we spend our lives chasing has nothing to do with peace. That realization didn't come with comfort, it came with grief, because in that moment, I saw my life from a distance, not with judgment, with honesty. I saw how much energy I had spent trying to be right, trying to be needed, trying to be remembered. I saw how often I confused movement with meaning, and I understood something I wish I had known at 30 or 50, or even 70. You don't suffer because life is cruel. You suffer because you keep arguing with what is. I didn't hear a voice say that. I felt it, like a truth that had been waiting patiently while I kept myself busy. People think seeing God means being told something dramatic. It doesn't. Sometimes it means finally seeing yourself without the stories you've been telling. In that stillness, I realized how often I tried to control outcomes that were never mine to control. How often I held on to people who were already gone in every way that mattered. How often I confused endurance with wisdom. And here's the part most people won't like hearing. Nothing in my life changed. Because I worked harder, everything changed. The moment I stopped resisting, there was no command to do more, no instruction to fix the world, just a quiet clarity that said, "You've been carrying weight that was never yours." At 96, you learn how heavy that sentence is, because when you look back, you see how many choices were driven by fear, dressed up as responsibility, fear of being alone, fear of being forgotten, fear of not mattering, and suddenly all of that fear felt unnecessary, not wrong, just unnecessary. That's when I understood something else, something even harder to accept. Peace does not come from understanding life. It comes from surrendering your argument with it. Most people never do this. They negotiate with reality. They demand explanations. They keep asking asterisk, why asterisk, instead of asking asterisk, what now asterisk, and they stay exhausted. What I experienced wasn't a reward, it was a release from needing everything to make sense, a release from carrying identities that had expired decades ago, a release from the quiet belief that life owed me clarity, and in that release, something surprising happened. I didn't feel smaller, I felt lighter. like I had finally put something down, and that's when the final realization of that moment arrived, the one that stayed with me long after the stillness passed. The reason most people never find peace is not because it's hidden, it's because it requires letting go of who you think you are. And most people would rather suffer than release that story. The light hadn't shifted. The world didn't pause to acknowledge what had happened, and yet I knew without needing proof that something irreversible had occurred, and yet I knew without needing proof that something irreversible had occurred. That's how you know an experience matters. It doesn't announce itself, it rearranges you quietly. For days afterward, I didn't tell anyone, not because I was afraid they wouldn't believe me, but because belief wasn't the point. The experience wasn't asking to be explained, it was asking to be lived. I began noticing things I had overlooked my entire life. How much noise we surround ourselves with. Not just sound, but distraction. Opinions, urgency, endless movement meant to protect us from stillness. Stillness scares people, because in stillness, you can't hide. I noticed how often people talk without saying anything, how often they chase meaning while ignoring presence, how often they mistake control for security. At 96, you stop pretending time is generous. You don't rush, but you also don't waste. And what I realized in the days after that experience was this. Most people live as if they're preparing for a future that never arrives. They postpone peace, they delay forgiveness, they wait for permission to rest, as if life is something that begins later. But life doesn't begin later, it's happening while you're waiting. I thought about all the years I spent thinking asterisk one more achievement. Asterisk would quiet my mind. One more solution, one more explanation, one more answer, but answers don't bring peace. Acceptance does. That's what the experience taught me. Not acceptance in the passive sense, acceptance as alignment. There's a difference between giving up and letting go. Giving up comes from defeat. Letting go comes from understanding. When you let go, you don't stop caring. You stop fighting reality, and that changes how you move through the world. I began speaking less, not because I had nothing to say, but because I no longer needed to fill silence. I began listening differently, not to respond, not to correct, just to hear. And people noticed. They didn't know why I seemed calmer. They just felt it. Peace is contagious when it's real, but it also unsettles people who survive on chaos. Some relationships softened, others faded, and for the first time in my life I didn't chase what was leaving. That might sound small, but it's one of the hardest things a human being can do. We are trained to cling, to preserve, to hold on even when something has already let go of us. But nothing is meant to be carried forever. Some things are meant to pass through you, teach you, and leave. The experience didn't make me religious, it made me honest. Honest about how often I had mistaken busyness for purpose. Honest about how often I endured things I should have released. Honest about how much of my suffering came from resisting what already was. I thought about the people I loved and the ways I tried to control their paths. Parents do this without realizing it. Partners do it quietly. Friends do it subtly. We say it's care. Sometimes it's fear, fear of being left behind. But love doesn't control, it allows. It allows. That was one of the clearest truths that settled in me afterward. Real love doesn't demand, it invites, and if it's refused, it grieves. But it does not chase. That understanding would have saved me years of pain if I had learnt it earlier. I think about how many arguments could have ended sooner, how many apologies I delayed because I needed to be right, how many moments I missed because I was busy proving something that didn't matter. When you get to my age, clarity becomes merciless. There's nowhere left to hide your regrets. But there's also something else. There's compassion for yourself, for your younger ignorance, for the fact that you were doing the best you could with what you knew at the time. The experience didn't erase regret. It softened it. It replaced self-judgment with understanding, and that alone felt like mercy. People often ask what God wants from them, but what if that's the wrong question? What if the question is, asterisk, what are you refusing to release? What if peace is not something you earn, but something you stop blocking? Most people think transformation is loud. It's not. It's quiet choices repeated daily, choosing not to react, choosing not to cling, choosing not to carry what isn't yours. That's what actually changed everything for me. Not a revelation, a release. I stopped trying to extract meaning from every experience. I stopped demanding clarity before moving forward. I stopped asking life to justify itself to me. And something remarkable happened. Life softened. Not because it became easier, but because I became less rigid. Suffering didn't vanish, loss didn't disappear, but resistance did. And without resistance, pain passes through instead of staying. That's something no one tells you. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Suffering is what happens when pain meets resistance. And resistance is born from the belief that things should be different than they are. At 96, I can tell you this without drama. Most of your exhaustion comes from arguing with reality, from replaying what should have happened, from rehearsing conversations that are already over, from carrying guilt for things you cannot change, from fearing futures that haven't arrived. The experience didn't tell me how to live. It showed me how to stop living against myself. That's why it changed everything. Not because I saw something extraordinary, but because I finally stopped interfering with what was already true. If you're listening to this and wondering what it means for you, let me be clear. You don't need to see what I saw. You don't need a moment. You don't need a sign. You need stillness. Not the kind you escape into, the kind you allow. Sit long enough without distraction, without rehearsing your identity, without narrating your worth, and you will feel it too, not as a voice, not as an image, as clarity, and clarity is always quiet. It doesn't rush you, it doesn't threaten you, it simply waits until you're ready to stop running. I'm 96 years old. I don't know how much time I have left, but I know this. If I had understood earlier what I understand now, my life would not have been louder, it would have been lighter. And that, more than answers, more than certainty, more than meaning, is what I believe we are all searching for.